Hey, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started back up and with a great topic here on community testing and back translation. So we have the opportunity this morning to hear from Taylor, and Shyamal Roy. I have the opportunity to work with Rob on a regular basis, and Rob is a seed company translation consultant working in the oral Bible translation department, working with us as a team. He's led in a number of training workshops. Some of you here have probably joined him or worked alongside him in some of those training workshops. He has experience consulting and checking oral translations in India. And before that, previously, he was also working in the Stony Project as a translation advisor in Canada and also Choctaw in Mississippi here in the United States. Shyamal comes to us from India. He serves with the New India Evangelistic Association. And he was just sharing with me and gave a great big smile. He's an Angika speaker, and they're going to be dedicating the Angika New Testament in December this morning. So maybe we can just thank the Lord through praise for that, alongside with Shyamal. Really thank the Lord for that. He was certified as a consultant in 2015 with SIL, and he's also done some consultant checking for a written project of and I apologize, I'm probably not going to be able to pronounce this, Shyamal. You can help me with it later. Panchaparganya in North India as well. And he's working as a consultant. I had the pleasure of meeting Shyamal in March when I visited a project that he's working on. And he's consulting with 3 languages, possibly 4 in oral Bible translation in the north of India. And they're going to present with us to us this morning, as we can see on the screen, community testing and back translation issues in oral Bible translation using Render. So Rob and Shyamal, please, welcome.
Thank you, Brother Dusty, for the wonderful introduction. I bring greetings to all of you from India. I work, as Dusty said, with the organization named New India Evangelistic Association, NIEA. It's also known as Navbharat Mission in India. NIEA is working with about 50 languages, and out of the 50 languages, 4 languages are under Render project. So in India, we say, Jai Masiki, means praise the Lord. So Jai Masiki to all of you. The Render projects under NIA have the pseudonyms Sauji, Sampa, Nikaraj, and Lihama. And today our presentation is going to focus on the Nikaraj project. So Nikaraj, let us share something about the Nikaraj community as a whole. Location of this community, it is located in the northern India, the state named UP, Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh is the largest state in North India, in the whole of India. So Nikaraj is located there. Population of the Nikaraj community is about 600,000. We call it 6 lakhs in India, but here in USA you say 600,000. Literacy rate, as you can see, it's very, very, very low. It's less than 5%. Nikaraj is a dialect of Kanjari, an unclassified Indo-Aryan language. Occupation of the Nikaraj people, Nikaraj-speaking community, is stone cutting is their main profession. They also earn money by begging, and this community also involved in some petty crimes like snatching and robberies and stealing and all that. So, and Nikaraj people are nomads for generations. They don't have permanent settlements, so they keep moving in a certain area, so they are nomadic tribes. And there are no written piece of work available in this language, Nicaraj. So you can see in the picture a Nicaraj man. He's cutting wood and his children looking at them. You can see their houses are very temporary kind of shelter. No, it's all mud houses with plastic sheets on their roofs. So a typical Nicaraj village council meeting would look like this, with people sitting in a circle and discussing some important issues concerning the community. Women are not encouraged to participate in such meetings, only men are there. So the main problems facing the Nicaraj community is they have extreme poverty, and there's total lack of educational opportunities for their children. There are several other problems facing the community, but these two are the main things. And what is the hope? We believe that the gospel of Jesus Christ is the only hope for the deliverance of people who are under the bondage of sin and curse for generations. That is what we are trying to do through our projects there. Nicaraj translation team. So we have 4 translators. They are full-time workers. They come to the office and work from 9 to 5, full-time. And we have 2 translators each from each of the 2 dialects. There are 2 dialectical variations in this language, and so we have appointed 2 translators from each of the dialectical regions, so to have a kind of balance in the team and a good representation of both the languages, both the dialects. We have a full-time translation advisor, we call them TA. We have 1 team facilitator, we call them TF. He's a full-time, and we have a project manager who is part-time because he is also taking care of other projects. The TAs and TF are theologically qualified. Currently, they have BTH, Bachelor in Theology. They spent time in the Nicaraj community. So before we appointed them, the first thing we did was to send them to live in the community, to get themselves acquainted with the people and with the customs and all that. And they have a good working knowledge of Hindi. Hindi is the language of wider communication, and also working knowledge of English they have. The role of the translation facilitator, TF, the role is to provide spiritual mentoring to the translators, keep record of the daily, weekly, and monthly work, and he's also responsible to send reports to the organization, maintain the record of attendance and leave, admin matters related to finance, and maintain relation with the church community. This is one important thing that he is responsible for. So some believers are there, some elderly people are there, some other organizations are also working. Mission agencies are also working in the community. So we have a church committee, we call them church committee. So this person, TF, is the person responsible for organizing the meeting and calling the meeting and kind of facilitating the church committee meetings and all that. The role of the translation advisor, TA, is to provide exegetical help to the team. Second is to provide technical support to the team, ensure the render processes are effectively followed by the team, provide some training in basic computer skills and English learning skills to the team. And now Rob is going to share with us how he led the workshops, training workshops, when we started the render project in this language.
Okay.
Over to Rob.
All right, thank you. I've got this. Okay, so just want to share briefly a basic schedule and overview of the initial translation workshop that we did for this project, for those of you who might have some interest in that. I think probably 3 weeks is a minimum amount of time that is needed to be spent on an introductory workshop. We're also trying now some new projects with two-week workshops, which may work out better. But 3 weeks, I would say, would be the very minimum. And the objectives were to give basic training in translation principles. One of the teams already had some experience in doing translation, so that wasn't needed for them, but just to review some of the basic principles. And then for the other team at the workshop, there were 2 language teams at the workshop, we wanted to go over some basic translation principles. Then make sure that the teams had discussed some of the basic key terms and concepts in Luke, and then to provide training and experience in using the OBT methods and the render software for the translation teams. And then also to begin drafting Luke and have some of the passages go through the process of revision and checking up to and through the consultant check to have some some of the passages approved by the consultant by the end of the workshop. Okay, so on the first day, we did a brief Old Testament overview, focusing on the people and events mentioned in Luke, and then a brief intertestamental survey. So I felt that was important to give everybody some background context for the book of Luke. There's a lot of things in Luke that refer back to the Old Testament, and if somebody has no Old Testament knowledge at all, it's hard to understand some of the things in Luke. So we just did that brief survey. Then some teaching modules on introduction to human communication and translation principles. Then on the second day, the teams listened to Luke chapter 1 and an intro and overview of Luke. And then we went through 2 short passages to introduce and practice the exegetical and internalization process, with the 2 teams working together on that. So everybody was working together as a group, and but we didn't bother recording anything at that point. Then each language team divided into 2 sub-teams, and the sub-teams from each language worked with a translation consultant and a translation advisor to exegete and internalize one set in Luke, while the B teams worked with the TC and the TA to exegete and internalize a different set in Luke. Now, if you're not familiar with render terminology, a set is the main discourse unit in render. It's similar in some cases to what is referred to as a pericope in New Testament studies, which is similar to a passage or a story. Generally, in render, the sets will be from 15 verses to 25 verses, so not really short and not really long. And then within those sets, there will be oftentimes divisions into smaller discourse units, which in render are called passages. So that's just something, if you're going to be using render, that you need to understand the render terminology. Okay, then day 3, the teams listened to Luke chapter 2, and then we did a presentation of the first part of the translation step of render. Now, when we first started training new language teams, we focused on trying to train the translators on how to use render. But then we decided that that wasn't really very effective, and we switched to focusing on training the translation consultants and the translation advisors and facilitators. And so that's what I do, and the other trainers are doing also. And that's what I would recommend for anybody who's doing training for new teams. And we also have a practice project in render that the advisors and the consultants can use to go through the steps of render themselves. And so they do that, And then the translators were there observing. So the translators are getting a little bit of input at that point, but it's mainly focused on training the consultant and the advisors. Okay, then the sub-teams worked on further internalization and orally drafting and recording their first set, and that took them about a total time of about 7 to 8 hours for sets of 21 verses and 13 verses. All right, then day 4, the teams listened to Luke chapter 3, and after they finished recording their first set, they moved on to repeat the process of exegeting, internalizing, and orally drafting and recording their second set in render, and those sets took about 7 hours for them to go through that process. On the 5th day, the teams listened to Luke chapter 4. We did a presentation of the peer review step of render, and then and they again practiced that using the render training project. And then the translators started the peer review process, and the TAs and the consultants work with them, training them and assisting them in that process. Day 6 was a half day on that Saturday. Again, the whole teams listened to the next chapter in Luke, which here we just did the first part of chapter Luke. And again, this is to make sure they've got the larger context of Luke before they're focusing in on smaller discourse units. And then we did presentations of the peer revised step, and then also the second part of the translation step. Now, why I've divided the translation step into 2 parts is because the first part deals with the basic process in recording a draft in the translation phase. And then the second part deals with if the translators or the translation advisors feel that a passage is too long for the translation team, if they're really struggling after trying a number of times to record it and re-record it and re-record it, and they're still making mistakes, then there's the option of making smaller divisions within that passage at a certain point, but we don't want people to be too quick to do that. So I don't train them to do that at the very beginning. Wait at least until the step of revising, and then train them to do that. Okay, so then the translators started the peer revised process, assisted again by the advisors and the consultants. And for OBT projects, we really try to stress that it's very important for the consultant on the project to be there at the very beginning of the project, especially if he doesn't have any experience or she doesn't have any experience in doing an oral Bible translation project, to learn the methods, to learn the software, but also to be involved in training the team. So we just feel that that's important for consultants to be involved from the very beginning of the project. All right, day 8, the teams listened to the second part of Luke 5, and then we did a presentation on the community check setup, which is the process of preparing the questions in advance and discussing what questions would be helpful to ask the community during the community check phase of the process. All right, and then, so that was Monday of the second week. Then day 9, they began their exegesis and internalization of the third set and continued working as needed on the various steps of the previous sets. And then the community people arrived in preparation for the community checking. So the community people aren't there at the very beginning because there's really no need for them until the beginning of the second week. And there's various names for the community people that come in. They can be called community reviewers or community checkers. However, the community checkers we refer to in Render and OBT are not the same as what some people in OBS refer to as community checkers. So if you're familiar with community checkers in OBS, they're people that have been trained to do community checking in a certain way, whereas the community checkers here in this process are untrained, uninitiated speakers. And so just wanted people to be aware of that difference. Okay, then on the 10th day, a community check step of render, a presentation is given to the translation consultant and advisors again. And then the translators started working on the community check with the community people, again, being trained and assisted by the translation advisors and the consultants. All right, then 11th day, we did presentations of the community check revision, and then also retell back translation step and the breath pause back translation steps of render. And then the teams began their exegesis and internalization of the 4th set. All right, day 12, the translators started the community check revision process after having gone through the community check. And again, assisted by the translation advisors and the consultants. And the back translators started working on the back translation process. And they were trained by the translation advisors and the consultants. And on this project, we trained all the community people. So I think there were, 3 people from each of the language communities? Yeah. So after they were finished doing the community checking, we just had them all get together for training on how to do the back translation, and then they worked together on doing the back translation. One person generally would record it, but all of them would discuss it and then record it. And that seemed to work better than previous attempts at getting people to do back translation, just one person at a time in isolation. So I think we're going to continue with that strategy. Then on day 13, another half day on Saturday, the teams began their exegesis and internalization of the 5th set, and they continued working on various steps in the prior sets as was necessary. All right, 15, I did a presentation of a consultant check step of render to the new translation consultants. Shyamal had already had training. This was his 2nd workshop, so he didn't need it, but there were a couple of new translation consultants there, so they got the training there. And then also the consultant check revision step. We did a presentation of that. Then on day 16, the translators started the consultant check revision process, again assisted by the translation advisors and facilitators. And then on day 17 through the end of the workshop, the teams continued going step by step through the render steps as prioritized by the render administrator and as prioritized by the render software itself. Okay, and then so for the outcomes, the translation teams received training and experience in exegeting, internalizing, recording, checking, and revising their oral drafts using the render software. And they were able to draft a total of 137 verses. They got 125 verses community checked, and 49 verses were checked and approved by the consultant.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. So, why is community checking so important for Nicaraj translation? We believe that, as in all other translation projects, community feedback is very important. And as I said earlier, there's no written material available in Nicaraj. Nicaraj community is totally oral culture. While the older people speak the pure version of Nicaraj, the younger people's dialect is Hindi influenced. They speak because they go out, they watch Hindi movies, and They go out of the villages to the town and other places. So their language, their dialect is Hindi influenced. So we believe that it's important to get the input from the older people also. The few churches in the Nicaraj community uses Bible in the state language, that is Hindi. As I said earlier, there are a few other mission agencies working in this community. But the pastors are from other culture. They don't speak Nicaraj. When they lead Sunday services, they use Hindi in their services. But most of the older people especially, they have a very little knowledge of Hindi. They don't understand Hindi well. Training for community checking. Translation advisor and facilitator, TA and TF, are being trained. We have a program going on there, Diploma in Bible Translation Program. We call it DBT program. And TA and TFs undergo training through this diploma program. And the translation consultant provides on-the-job training to the TA and TF. And then the TA and TF, they then train the translators and guide them how to do community checking. So how do we do community checking in Nicaraj? One, we do it in the office, in the office room, and we also do some community checking in the community. Community checking in office. For this purpose, 2 young community testers come to our translation office. Older people, they don't prefer not to go out of the village. They don't come, even if we request them or insist, but they never want to come out of the village to our office. So the young testers, but the reality is the young testers, they don't speak a pure Nicaraj. Their dialect, as I said earlier, is heavily influenced by Hindi. So we still need to check our translation with the older people in the village. That is why we do some part of community checking in the village also. However, as you know, the prevailing political situation in India is not friendly to this kind of gospel work. And there is a potential risk if we go to the village with laptops, and if we do it in the village setup, it's risky. So it is safer to do the checking, most of the checking in the village, in the office, because of the pro-Hindu government there. And this is one of the features that I am planning to talk to the render developers if they can provide us on our mobiles so that our translators can take the sets on their mobiles instead of taking the laptop to the community, which attracts a lot of attraction when we take the laptops. So if they can provide us our sets on the laptop, because all the young people, they have laptops. In India, that's a beauty, even if they are...
Cell phones. They have cell phones.
Cell phones. They have cell phones, yeah. So they have cell phones, so we are planning to use their cell phones if they can take it to the village, the sets for doing the community checking. Community checking, when we do it in the village, every few weeks, the translators go to their villages, and for this purpose, 5 to 10 people gather together at a place, at a common place, and villages, they enjoy listening to the sets because it's in their heart language. They just instantly gets connected and they enjoy listening to it, and they give very useful input in the checking process. There are 2 parts of community checking. One is community retail, when we tell the community people to retell a passage or a big chunk of the set. And the community retail, it helps us to identify perception of the main points or characters, the main themes in that set. And second is question and response, and it helps us to check the comprehension of the key concepts and the key terms. Now, I want to give you some interesting examples and findings of the community checking. So when the team was checking for the term came evil spirit. So the Nikaraj rendering for evil spirit was in Hindi, Dushtatma, that is taken from the Hindi Bible. That is literally wicked soul in English. So they asked the community tester, what is this wicked soul or Dushtatma? So the answer was, anybody who is wicked in heart is a Dushtatma. We can call anybody as a Dushtatma if he has a wicked heart. So the following question was, can human beings be Dushtatma or evil spirit? They answered yes. Anybody can be wicked, evil spirit, or Dushtatma. Anybody can be that. So the following question, so how do you say when some kind of evil power enters in somebody and he starts behaving very abnormally? How do you describe that? So the answer was, we call that kind of evil power in our language as Bayar. That is literally in English, evil power, Bayar. So then the team, they liked this suggestion and input from the community, and they decided to change their earlier rendering to this new rendering, Bayar, and they were very happy that they got a real and very nice word for that. So the team changed the rendering accordingly. Second example was for the word plead. Binti Karna was in Hindi. And when the team went for the checking, the response from the team, from the community was that they had never heard about this word before. So when the team explained what it is, then the word, the rendering that came from the community was Hadjudai. Hadjudai is literally in English as folding of hands. So the team then changed this rendering also. Another example was for bowing down, that is Dandvat Karna, that is in Hindi. And when we tested it in the community, so the real Nikaraj word was dhok lagana. So that was nice finding. Now retail back translation. When we do the back translation, let us talk about something about the back translation aspect. The retail back translation, as Rob said, is done by 2-3 community testers. Previously, when we started with only one back translator. But it was not going smoothly, so we had 2-3 community testers. Is it back translation or just the retailing? Okay.
Yeah, I think they work together on the retail also.
Yes. So there were 2-3 community testers working together with one person recording. And as I said, it identifies the perception of the main points and characters. Breath pause back translation. It is done by 2-3 community testers, but only one recording their voice. And the translation consultant first makes a note requesting that the team review the back translation and send it back to the translators before doing the consultant checking. The TA and TF, the advisor and the facilitator, reviews the back translation with the translators, and they listen for problems in the back translation or in the translation and make necessary corrections. After that, they send the corrected back translation and revised translation draft back to the consultant for the consultant checking. And it helps to identify and correct problems in the back translation and the translation draft, which lessens the load of the consultant.
Yep. Now, can I make a comment here? Yeah, so this is a new process that we tried out on this project because in a number of projects, the translation advisors have suggested or requested that it would be nice if, after the back translation's done, the advisor would have a chance to review it with the team before it was sent to the consultant. So Render hasn't been able to put that into the process yet as a, I need to do something different? can use this. Okay, I'll just use this. But you got to turn this on now. Is it on? Okay. Okay. All right. So yeah. So it's relatively simple to do. When the translation consultant gets the back translation from the back translator, he just sends it back, and it's probably not worthwhile sending the retail back translation back. But the breath pause back translation, if he just makes a note and asks the team to go through and review it and make any comments on it, then the team gets it back. The team works with the advisor. He's got the read-only admin role. He can listen to the back translation, and then they check the back translation against the actual translation that the translators have on their laptop, and they just go back and forth checking it, and then they can make any notes on any problems in the back translation, and if they find from the back translation that there's a problem in the translation, then they can go ahead and do a revision at that point. And so that, at least theoretically, has the potential of taking care of a lot of problems that the consultant then doesn't have to deal with.
Thank you. Comparison between the Nicaraj written look and Nicaraj oral look. So before the Nicaraj team started the oral translation in render, they had already completed the look in the written format on paratext. That was interesting. The written translation done by the team is, we found that it is strongly influenced by Hindi. After doing the oral translation, completing the look in oral and in the render, the team is reporting that they want to go back and change the written look at many places because of many Hindi renderings, and it's not natural in Nicaraj. So now they want to go back and revise their written in paratext, because they themselves find that, at many places we have renderings just taken from the Hindi, which is not natural for our Nicaraj language. So it's the question of naturalness is there, and also about rendering of the key terms and comprehension. One of the reasons why they shifted from paratext to render was this, that because the translators, the MTTs, they had a very little schooling. They were 7th grade, or the team leader was 8th grade. So they had very little schooling, and they were literally struggling to write. And so writing was very difficult for them. And so it was taking a lot of time, and it took a much longer time to do look on paratext compared to how they have completed look in render. So it was very time consuming for them when they were working on the written format. So we are very encouraged that the whole NT will be completed sooner on render compared to had they continued with the paratext or written format. Some encouraging thoughts. Our oral Bible translation is contributing to the growth of ethno arts also, as some good song composers and singers are coming up in the community. They are so encouraged, especially the community, the people whom we engage for community testing. And when we go to the village, the villagers, some of them, they have some hidden talent. And we have seen that now they want us to get their songs recorded. So they have a set of 25 songs ready in Nicaraj that have been composed recently in the last 1 year or so by these community people. Because of the very low literacy rate, the community is more interested in the oral translation. The community people, they can't read Nicaraj. Even if we do our on the written format, the reality is that most of the people will not be able to read it. However, the church leaders, the other culture, the church leaders and the mission agencies who was working there, the pastors who come from a different background, they are requesting us to continue our work on the paratext also, to have it on the written format also, so that they can use in their churches for their services. So our hope is that we are planning to transcribe the oral translation and adapt it for the written translation also. So maybe it will happen book by book. After we complete Luke, we will have it transcribed into the written format, and we will have both to serve the community as a whole. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your, sorry?
Okay. Thank you, Shyamal and Rob, for the presentation. It gives us a clear understanding about the process doing OBT using renders with some adjustment. And yeah, now I open up questions, comments to Rob and Shyamal. And for those of you who don't feel comfortable speaking up, you can write down your questions on the index cards around you. You may grab one if you need it. And if you want pens, it's also there at the back. And you can put your cards at the back, or the microphone runner can read it for you. Okay, now questions, comments?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It was really interesting for me. And I have many questions, but I will just ask some few. The first question is, when I see the way you design it, the first question that came to my mind, how do you recruit people that you have on board? How do you recruit, for example, those who are translating? And the second question linked to this was about training. I saw, for example, that you had the TA and
TA and TF.
Yes, TA and TF trained in
Diploma.
Yes, that was more about theology. But I know we are doing render, it's oral. You have some kind of oral background that maybe you need. And you have the software itself, which is another training. So how do you recruit people, and how do you make sure that they have the proper training for them to operate? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. As I said, before we started our project in Nicaragua and in other 3 languages also, the first thing we do is to establish the church committees. So there are some small churches functioning in these language communities, and we get the church leaders on board. Any recruitment in the team is for the translators, for the mother tongue translators, is from the recommendation of the church leaders and the church committee. That is a very important part of our recruitment process. So they are recruited through the recommendation of the church committees. And our attempt is to find the best persons from the community who are good in storytelling and who have some schooling. So that is what we do. And when it comes to recruiting the translation advisor and facilitator, that we take from out of the community. But as I said, there are some criteria. They have to have some theological training, good understanding of the LWC, and it's also, for us, it's also important that before they come to work in the team, they spend at least a few months in the community to get understanding of the people and how they live and their culture and their language also. So these are some of the things that we give attention to when we recruit people in our team. The second question was about the training. The training for advisor and the facilitator is, currently we are giving them training based on Diploma in Bible Translation. So Diploma in Bible Translation program is not totally a theological program. There are aspects of Bible principles of Bible translation, community checking, how to do community checking, how to do back translation. Every step is included in that program. If you want, I can send you a digital curriculum of that diploma program, and you can look into it. So our attempt is to get the TA and TF trained in the diploma so that they in turn can train and guide the teams. I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I just wanted to ask you, after all this process, do you guys encounter some challenges, especially in the communities? If yes, how do you deal with it? Maybe, for example, between you, your team and also the church ministers in the churches. Do you guys encounter some challenges, and how do you best deal with it? Thank you.
So far, we have not encountered any big problems, but the problems is not coming from the community. The problems are coming from the government agencies and the Hindu activists who are very active in those areas. So the problem is from their side. When we go to the community, when we have community checking there, or when we call the meetings, there is a potential problem there from the Hindu activists there. They keep watch of who is coming in the village, what they are doing, for what purpose they are coming. So any outsider, when we go into the community, so they keep watch over our activities, and that is the area where we are concerned about, and we are very cautious in that. But as far as the community is concerned, the Nicaraj community has welcomed, and they like what we are doing. They enjoy, actually, when they listen our sets in the language, and they're very encouraged. So there is no bias, Hindu or Christian bias in the community, and they have always welcomed us to do our community checking and church meetings there. So the problem is not from their side, but we are very concerned and we are very cautious because recently some Christian workers have been arrested who were working for our organization. They were not from this project, from a different project in Jharkhand. So we are very concerned, and we are very cautious there.
Thank you for the very thorough overview of the training process. And I have two quick questions. One is, I don't know whether you mentioned the duration of a given training session during one of those days. And secondly, do you have any experience with translator fatigue, loss of focus, or just weariness in this process where the attention goes down, or just kind of what some of those practical issues in that training process?
Thank you. The training is for the TA and the translation advisor and the facilitators. And the duration of this program is 2 years, but they can do it on the job training. So while they are in the team, they're guiding the team, or they are also given a certain amount of time to devote to this training purpose. So that goes simultaneously. So as far as the translator fatigues and practical issues are concerned, the biggest practical difficulty that we have faced in Nicaraj is that the translators, they find it very difficult to work within the office setup. they get tired. They just can't sit for 8 hours in the office because they are never used to that. They've never been to regular schooling or college. So that is one area where we struggle practically. And so it's difficult for them to tune themselves with the office setup and office discipline and kind of things, and reporting also. So this is one challenge we face, and that is one area where we struggle.
And in the workshops, we'll have a time of teaching, and then a time of practice, and then and maybe you need to talk to the advisors and facilitators to have the translators get up and move around more. Okay, because when they're going through the internalization process, part of that is getting up and acting out things. We tell them they don't have to sit when they're going through the internalization process, when they're working together, retelling the section of the passage or whatever. Even when they're recording, they don't have to be sitting. Yeah, they've got headsets that are long enough that they can stand up and record, and so we try to keep them a little bit more active because, like Shyamal was saying, they're not used to sitting at a desk for even a couple hours at a time, right? And so just trying to keep them active and having frequent breaks, that helps. Did that answer your question, Alan? Okay.
Okay. Did you say that at the end of the process you're going to transcribe, Luke? Okay.
Yes.
So I have two questions about that. One is, why do you want to have it in a written form? And the second question is more broadly, is this common? And so oral Bible translation isn't really a way to skip the hard orthography step, because often teams will want to transcribe it. Those are my questions.
Thank you. We want to transcribe it after completing a Luke or some books. We have not decided if we are going to do it book by book or if we are going to do after completing the whole New Testament. But the reason we want to do it is that in every church committee meetings, the church leaders, they are constantly requesting us to give them something in the written format that they can use in the church services for their sermons and for reading the scripture. They are very much eager to get that written scripture. The community is happy with the oral. They are very much happy with that oral. But the church leaders, they want to continue, in order to continue their ministry and work, they want the written form also. That is the reason why we want to do it, and because it's also the question of ownership. We can't ignore what the church leaders are requesting us for. So it raises the question of ownership, because if they feel that we are not listening to them, they can withdraw, and that will raise the question of ownership also. So that's the reason why we want to transcribe Luke, that is in the project, and we have told them that we will be doing it book by book, or 2-3 books at a time, or the whole New Testament all together. So what was the second question?
Is that a common desire in OBT? And maybe you don't know, maybe somebody knows. Is this common? So if in the country where I work, if they want to do OBT to avoid having to do orthographies, will they be able to avoid it?
Yeah, I think, like Shyamal said, it just depends on the stakeholders, what they want. So like the project I was involved in Canada, the tribe didn't want anything printed in their language. And so that wasn't an issue because the oral was adequate. Nobody wanted anything written. So it really depends on, the stakeholders involved. It's not necessary, but if people want it, it's certainly worthwhile. But it's something that can be delayed until, the orthography issues or other issues are worked out. But in the process of getting there, there's generally a lot more community involvement, and the people are receiving things more quickly in a medium that they can understand.
More question?
Yes, so you talked about how the older people speak the more pure form of the language and the younger people speak a form that's influenced by Hindi. So my question is, your community checking is seeking to get input from both the young and the old, right?
Right.
Which version, I guess, are you aiming for with your translation? Are you trying to have it closer to the pure form or closer to the form that the younger people speak? Because I can imagine within not a very long, in a short time, that pure form might seem archaic or maybe difficult to understand for generations to come. So what were you trying to get kind of in between the two, or what were you aiming for?
Okay, thank you. That's a very wonderful question. This is something that I was discussing with other people also. When the team goes into the community and then they find, like I give some examples, some words that is pure Gihara Nikaraj rendering. When they find these words, the reaction from these team members is they are very encouraged. They tell us, oh, that is how we should have done it before. So they think that their language, when they find new words, new renderings, these young people are also encouraged. They feel that their language is enriched, and they are also motivated, and they are encouraged to find more such words. So it is helpful for them. I personally asked them, when you find these new renderings and new words and new phrases in your community from the older people, means what do you want to do? Do you want to adopt it, or do you want to discard it? But the reaction comes from the team members that they're very encouraged, and it's very nice. And actually they keep a record of all these new words and new renderings and new phrases that they learn from the community. So our attempt is to reach the whole community as a whole, and it is helpful that we get the community input into our process, and the team is making adjustments in the translation, and they are very encouraged. So we are trying to reach the older people and the younger people also, and the community as a whole. But this process is helpful. The community checking in the village and the renderings and the words that we learn in the process. Thank you.
Yes, I have two related questions. You said you had a document that you could send to this gentleman relating your process. But within that document, I'm interested in how you are using community checkers to do back translation, and into what language are you doing the back translation? Okay. Or do you have a second back translation after that's been done?
Thank you. We engage for the back translation purpose, we use 3 to 4 people from the community. The back translation is, when I work with this team as a consultant, I can understand like 50% of their language, but still I don't understand the other half. So I need the back translation to be in Hindi. And this is what they can do. These back translators cannot do a back translation in any other language, definitely not in English. So I need the back translation in Hindi. But I asked the same question to Rob, that suppose he goes to do a consultant checking for Nikaraj. So what back translation will he require from the back translators? So he told me that in that case, he will need one back translation from Nikaraj to LWC, that is Hindi, and second back translation from Hindi to English. So that will be one added step for any outsider or any foreigner going and working as a consultant there. And about the training, this Diploma in Bible Translation program, all these steps in translation, starting from the principles of Bible translation, community checking, exegesis, drafting, back translation, all these have been addressed in different modules. So it's very helpful. Though it was originally designed for the written translation format, but we have found that these principles and this training is helpful for the oral teams and oral translators also. So I'll try to send the digital format, and you can look into it. It's also available in Hindi and English also. Okay, that was another question. So when the community people come for doing the back translation, as I said, the TA and TF, they have gone through this process. So they train these community people how to do it. There are two steps. One is retail back translation, and one is breath pause back translation. So we demonstrate them how to do it, and then they learn, and they do it in Hindi. Did I answer the question?
Same people who are doing the retail and the breath pause are also then doing it again into the back translation.
Yes. The same community people, yes. Yep.
You always have the same community people?
Oh, the same people, same set of people. No. We have different set of people. They consist of three, 4 people working together and one of them recording, but we have different set of people coming at different times. Yeah.
I think I'll stand. The main purpose for me to stand is just to thank you very much for the presentation, and also to appreciate the much more refined way of doing things in your project or in your projects. I'm grateful that there has been much more organized work. Now, yesterday I was asked something about how people like the product, and I saw that there was also a question about why these people want this look transcribed, and since you explained that they are demanding, and somebody explained that the oral translation or Bible translation, because of the internalization procedure, which enables the ideas to be grasped right at the conception from the source or from whatever text, straight to the mind of the translator. It is then quickly dressed up with the words, the language, which is the natural language of that person receiving it. And that process makes a fresh production of natural language. Now, that makes naturality very natural to this type of translation. And that makes it so so enjoyable to to the audience. And no wonder the oral, the internalized product is well received. Now, the brain is a processing machine, an information processing machine. When you subject it to processing two languages at the same time as it conceives, it will naturally stagger between and sometimes adopt what's not in the language of the receiving brain. So no wonder there will be unnatural things. And sometimes when I was still at translating stage, I used to say, am I the one who really wrote that? Because the consultant would say, is this natural in your language? And I said, did I write that? But it's later when I've been helped by those who have the time to think about what we are doing. For us, we keep just working. We are propelled by the work. Thank you very much.
Okay. More questions, comments? Yeah, the back.
Okay, thank you very much. When you mentioned the community people with whom you checked your translation, are they mainly the Christian groups only, or you are also considering the other people to be involved in checking process?
Thank you. These community people with whom we do community testing is mostly non-believers, non-Christians. But there may be one or two there in the group, because as I said, when we go to the community, 5, 10 people gather together. So, but mostly they are non-Christians. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mine is not a question, it's a comment. I thank you very much for your sound presentation. If I'm not mistaken, you will stop me. I heard you talking of people not looking at you well if you go out to reach your people. There are some influential people who do not look at you well. Is that so? Okay. I just want to comment on that because I also had experience like that when I was back home. There are some people who do not like us coming to people because they feel like, oh, these are the very guys who now teach people wrong things. So they feel like not loving other people to live the way they want to live. It's them who want to live the way they want to live and to oppress other people. So I encountered such challenges for many times. So I just want to share this with you because I've been listening to commenters who didn't share this with you, but you repeated it many times that you face those challenges. And now, what I was always saying to them, when I come to them, they say, oh, you are coming, you who divide people, who always come and divide people. I say, no, I don't divide people. What I'm doing is something straight, and it is not politics, it is not tribalism, is something to do with my language and to do with the word of God to my people. So I always tell them clearly that this is not something politically. It's not something to do with racism. It's something to do with, for instance, they are always advanced because they are already having pastors and they are having Bible written in their own languages. I tell them that you are lucky you have this already. So now, if we want to develop this and have a word of God in our own language, is that a problem? So I always talk to them in a polite way. I don't angry with them. We come to them, we talk to them, we want them to know exactly what is it that we are doing. It's not the division of people or to show who we are or we are rather better than them. And sometimes we involve these people in like your presentation, very good, showing that you have some bots like TA, that team advisory board, something like that. And sometimes you invite the kind of those people to this board to give you advices also so that they stay away from that thinking mentality. Thank you very much.
Okay, yes. Thank you, Shyamal and Rob, for the presentation. And now, time for lunch, and you may be dismissed. Thank you.